Daeho Kim pressed his face against the cold metal wall of his tiny room. The red numbers on his forehead glowed back at him from the reflection. 0.1%. Those 3 small digits had ruined his entire life. He touched the loyalty brand on his skin. Every person in the galaxy had one. Most people had numbers like 85% or 92%.
All good citizens who loved the Galactic Alliance and would never cause trouble. But Daeho was different. His brain refused to accept the
loyalty programming that made everyone else so perfectly obedient. The door to his room slid open with a sharp hiss. Commander Unesio Park stood in the doorway, her own loyalty brand showing a perfect 97.3%. She looked at Daeho like he was a dangerous animal. "Get up, Saboteur," she said. "You have work to do." Daeho stood slowly. He was tall for a human, with tired eyes and rough hands from years of manual labor. Once, he had been a brilliant engineer. He had designed faster-than-light engines and solved problems that stumped entire teams of scientists. But that was before the loyalty testing. Before everyone learned what his numbers really meant. "What kind of work?" he asked. "The waste recycling system in Sector 7 is broken again," Park said. "Fix it." Daeho nodded. Of course it was waste recycling. They never gave him important work anymore. Not since his test results came back showing he was the most dangerous potential traitor in recorded galactic history. He followed Park through the narrow corridors of Harmony Prime. The space station was huge, home to 50,000 beings from dozens of different species. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, and traders all worked together in perfect harmony. The loyalty system made sure of that. Other workers stepped aside when they saw Daeho coming. His red numbers made everyone nervous. Dr. So-Young Lee, human biochemist he had once considered a friend, quickly looked away when their eyes met. Technician Hyan Wu-Choi actually crossed to the other side of the corridor to avoid walking. Near him, "They are afraid of you," Park said, noticing his expression, "as they should be." A loyalty index of 0.1% means you cannot be trusted. You would betray the Alliance if given the chance. "I have never betrayed anyone," Daeho said quietly. "Only because we watch you every moment of every day," Park replied. "The computers predict you will turn traitor within the next 5 years. Maybe sooner." They reached Sector 7. The smell hit Daeho immediately. Something was very wrong with the waste system. He opened his toolkit and got to work, trying to ignore the security camera that followed his every movement. The problem was more complicated than Park had said. Someone had tried to fix the system before him, but they had made it worse. Daeho traced the pipes and checked the filtration units. His mind worked through the engineering puzzle, finding connections and solutions that others had missed. This was the only time he felt truly alive anymore. When he was solving problems, his brain could work the way it was meant to work, free and unbound by artificial programming. "Kim," a voice called behind him. He turned to see Dr. Jinanam approaching. She was the station's lead archaeologist, specializing in ancient alien civilizations. Unlike the others, she did not seem afraid of him. Loyalty index was a respectable 78.2%. High enough to be trusted, but low enough to think independently. "Dr. Nam," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "I heard you were the best xeno-engineer on the station before your classification changed," she said. "I used to be," Daeho replied. "Now I fix toilets. I might have work for you, real work." She glanced around to make sure Park was not listening. "We found something on the planet below. Ancient ruins. The scanning teams think they are at least 300,000 years old." Daeho felt his heart beat faster. Ancient technology was his specialty. Before the loyalty testing, he had been the Alliance's expert on extinct alien civilizations. He knew more about predecessor artifacts than anyone else in this sector of the galaxy. "What kind of ruins?" he asked. "Massive underground complex. The architecture does not match any known species. We think it might be predecessor technology, but we cannot be sure. The designs are unlike anything in our databases." Predecessors were a mystery that had puzzled scientists for centuries. They had built incredible structures across the galaxy, then vanished without explanation. No one knew what had happened to them, or why they had disappeared so completely. "Why are you telling me this?" Daeho asked.
Ow!
because the engineering team cannot make sense of what they found down there. Technology is too advanced, too different. We need someone who can think outside normal parameters. She meant someone whose mind was not bound by loyalty programming. Someone who could see patterns that trained, obedient minds might miss. Commander Park will never approve it, Deho said.
Ow.
She already has, Nam replied, reluctantly. The Alliance Council wants answers about these ruins. They are willing to use any resource available, even a potential saboteur. Deho felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope. Real work again. A chance to use his mind for something important, instead of just fixing broken pipes and cleaning systems. When do we leave? He asked. Tomorrow morning? Dot. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. There will be restrictions, armed guards, constant monitoring. If you show any sign of sabotage or rebellion, they will shoot you immediately. I understand, he said. After Nam left, Deho finished repairing the waste system. His hands moved automatically while his mind raced with possibilities. Predecessor ruins. Ancient technology that no one understood. It was exactly the kind of challenge he had been born to solve. That night, he lay on his narrow bed and stared. At the ceiling, through the small window, he could see the planet below. Kepler 442b was a gas giant with 17 moons. The ruins were on the largest moon, buried deep underground and waiting for someone smart enough to unlock their secrets. He touched his loyalty brand again. 0.1%. The mark of a traitor and saboteur. But maybe, just maybe, it could also be the mark of someone free enough to solve problems that bound minds could not handle. Tomorrow, he would find out if being the galaxy's most dangerous potential enemy could somehow make him its most valuable asset. The numbers on his forehead glowed softly in the darkness, counting down to a destiny he could not yet imagine. The shuttle dropped through the thin atmosphere of Kepler 4 for 2b's largest moon. Deho pressed his face to the small window and watched the rocky surface grow larger below them. Somewhere down there, buried deep underground, lay secrets that had been hidden for 300,000 years. Stay in your seat, Saboteur, Security Chief Sangman, you growled from across the cabin. His hand rested on his weapon, ready to draw it at the first sign of trouble. 2 other guards flanked him, their loyalty brands all showing numbers above 90%. Dr. Jinanam sat beside Deho reviewing data on her tablet. She had been quiet during the journey, but he could see the excitement in her eyes. This was the discovery of a lifetime for an archaeologist. The initial scans show the complex extends at least 5 kilometers underground, she said quietly. The walls are made from some kind of crystalline metal we have never seen before. It does not appear in any of our databases. Deho nodded, his mind already working on the puzzle. Unknown materials meant unknown technology. The predecessors had built things that current science could barely understand. The shuttle landed with a soft thump near the excavation site. A temporary base had been set up around the entrance to the ruins. Prefabricated buildings housed equipment and research teams. Scientists from a dozen different species worked together, cataloging every discovery. Dr. Veltar, the expedition leader, met them at the landing pad. He was an Altrurian, tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. His species was known for their analytical minds and attention to detail. Welcome to the dig site, he said, in his precise, formal way of speaking. I must warn you that what we have found challenges our understanding of ancient galactic history. He led them to the entrance of the complex. Perfectly circular shaft had been cut into the moon's surface, descending straight down into darkness. The walls were smooth as glass, with patterns of light running along them like veins. We believe this was not originally an entrance, Veltar explained. The shaft appears to have been melted through solid rock by some kind of energy beam. Whatever made this hole did so from the inside, trying to get out. Deho felt a chill run down his spine. Something had been trapped down there and had tried to escape. They descended in a small elevator platform. The shaft walls were covered in symbols and markings that no one could read. The patterns seemed to shift and move in the corner of Deho's vision. But when he looked directly at them, they were still. How deep does it go? He asked. We have mapped 7 levels so far, Nam replied. Each one is larger than the last. The bottom levels are so vast our scanners cannot find the walls. The elevator stopped at the first level. They stepped out into a corridor that stretched away in both directions, curving gently out of sight. The walls glowed with a soft phosphorescent light that seemed to come from within the material itself. Dr. Sa Young Lee was already there, taking samples from the wall material. She looked up when she saw Daeho and quickly looked away again. Her loyalty brand showed 91.7%. High. Enough to be trusted with important work. The molecular structure is impossible, she said to Veltar, ignoring Daeho completely. The atoms are arranged in patterns that should not be stable. It is as if the laws of physics work differently for this material. Daeho walked closer. To examine the wall, his trained eye picked up details the others had missed. The glowing patterns were not random decoration. They were circuit paths, energy conduits running through the structure like blood vessels. This is not just building material, he said. The entire complex is one giant machine. What kind of machine? Veltar asked. I do not know yet, Daeho admitted, but it is still active. Ack! Can you feel that vibration? Something's running down. Here, drawing power from somewhere. Security chief. You moved closer, his suspicion obvious. How do you know that? You in contact with this technology somehow? I am an engineer, Daeho said patiently. I can recognize active systems when I see them. They moved deeper into the complex. Each room they entered was stranger than the last. Some chambers were filled with crystalline structures that hummed with barely audible energy. Others contained what looked like viewing screens, but they showed only swirling patterns of light. In one room, they found something that made everyone stop and stare. It was a map of the galaxy, but not as it appeared now. The star patterns were different, older. Whole sections that were now empty space showed clusters of bright points. This map is ancient, Nam breathed. Look at the spiral arms. They are in completely different positions. Daeho studied the map carefully. His knowledge of galactic astronomy told him this represented the galaxy as it had appeared hundreds of thousands of years ago. But there was something else, something that made his blood run cold. Large sections of the map were marked in red. Entire spiral arms had been crossed out, marked with symbols that looked disturbingly like warnings. Dr. Veltar, he said slowly, have you found any records of what happened to the predecessors? Any indication of why they disappeared? None, the Altrarian replied. They seem to have vanished overnight. One day they were building these incredible structures across the galaxy, the next day they were gone. What if they did not just disappear? Daeho asked. What if something made them disappear? The room fell silent. Everyone stared at the ancient map with its ominous red markings. They continued exploring. Daeho's mind kept returning to the map. The more he saw of the complex, the more convinced he became that this place had not been built for research or exploration. It had been built as a shelter, a place to hide from something terrible. In the deepest chamber they could reach, they found something that confirmed his fears. It was a sealed vault, its door covered in warning symbols from dozens of different ancient languages. Most of the writing was too old to translate. But Daeho recognized enough symbols to get the basic message. Danger. Do not open. Sealed for the protection of all life. We need to open this, Veltar said immediately. Whatever is inside could be the key to understanding predecessor technology. No, Daeho said firmly. Look at these warnings. They were not put here lightly. You are a saboteur, security chief, you said. You want to prevent us from making this discovery? But we will not be stopped by your paranoia. Dr. Nam looked torn between scientific curiosity and caution. Perhaps we should study the warnings more carefully first, she suggested. But Veltar was already activating his scanner, analyzing the door's locking mechanism. The Alliance Council expects results, he said. Cannot return empty-handed. That night, back at the surface base, Daeho could not sleep. He kept thinking about the map and the warnings. His unbound mind, free from loyalty programming, could see patterns that the others could not or would not acknowledge. The predecessors had not just disappeared. They had been running from something. They had built this complex as a warning beacon, a message for whoever came after them. But a warning about what? He slipped out of his quarters and walked to the communication array. If his suspicions were right, there might be similar complexes on other worlds. Places where the predecessors had tried to leave messages for future civilizations as he worked at the computer. Searching ancient databases for similar structures, he found what he was looking for. Dozens of sites across the galaxy, all with the same characteristics, all built in the same time period, all sealed with the same warnings, and according to the astronomical data, all built just before the predecessors vanished forever. Something was coming. Something that had destroyed the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. And if Deho was right, it was coming back. Deho watched in horror as Dr. Veltar placed his hand on the sealed vault door. The ancient warning symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Deep within the complex, something that had been sleeping for 300,000 years started to wake up. "Stop," Deho shouted, but it was too late. The door mechanism clicked and hissed. Ancient seals broke with sounds like breaking glass. A low rumble echoed through the entire complex as systems that had been dormant since before humans existed began to activate. "Fascinating," Veltar said, completely unaware of what he had just done. "The technology is responding to biological contact. Most remarkable." Inside the vault, a crystalline structure began to glow. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a frozen scream made of light and energy. As they watched, holographic displays flickered to life around the crystal. Showing images and symbols from the deep past, Dr. Jinanam stepped closer, her scanner recording everything. The crystal appears to be some kind of data storage device. It is broadcasting on multiple frequencies. "Broadcasting to where?" Deho asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. "Unknown," Nam replied. "The signal is extremely powerful. It could reach anywhere in the galaxy, or beyond the galaxy." Deho thought with growing dread. The holographic images began to form recognizable shapes. Star maps appeared, showing the galaxy as it had been long ago. But these maps were different from the one they had seen before. These showed something moving between the stars, vast shapes that consumed everything in their path. "What am I looking at?" Security Chief Yu demanded, his hand moving to his weapon as if bullets could stop whatever threat these images represented. The crystal pulsed brighter, and suddenly the images became clearer. Deho saw worlds dying, entire solar systems going dark. Massive creatures moved through space like living ships, feeding on planets and stars alike. The predecessors had not just vanished. They had been eaten. "Turn it off," Deho said urgently. "We need to turn it off now." "Why?" Veltar asked. "This is the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history. We are seeing the final records of the predecessor civilization." "We are doing more than that," Deho replied. "We are sending a signal to whatever killed them. We are telling them where to find us." But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The crystal continued to pulse, its signal growing stronger. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and hungry was stirring. Over the next 3 days, strange reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy readings near the galactic rim. Several remote outposts reported equipment failures and communication blackouts. On the edge worlds, people began having nightmares about vast shadows moving between the stars. Deho translated more of the predecessor warnings, working frantically to understand what was coming. The ancient records spoke of creatures called the Devourers, beings that existed partially outside normal space. They came every 300,000 years when the galaxy completed its rotation through a specific region of the universe. "Feed on life itself," he explained to the gathered research team. "It's not just organic matter, but the energy that makes consciousness possible. They consume entire civilizations and grow stronger with each feeding." Dr. Sol Young Lee finally looked at him directly for the first time since his loyalty classification. "How can you be sure these translations are accurate?" she asked. "Because the same warnings appear at predecessor sites across the galaxy," Deho replied. "I have been cross-referencing the symbols and patterns. The message is consistent everywhere. Something is coming, and we woke it up. Admiral Tethras of the Alliance High Command contacted the dig site via long-range communication. The Admiral was a Kethran, a species known for their military precision and unwavering loyalty to order. His loyalty index was a perfect 99.8%. Engineer. Kim, the Admiral said, his image flickering on the communication screen. Your claims about an ancient threat are causing panic in some sectors. The Alliance Council wants you to stop spreading these rumors immediately. They are not rumors, Deho said. The evidence is clear. We need to prepare defenses. A person with a 0.1% loyalty index cannot be trusted with matters of galactic security, Tethras replied coldly. You are trying to sabotage Alliance operations with fear and misinformation. Then ignore me, Deho said desperately. But at least evacuate the Outer Rim worlds. Get people away from the galaxy's edge before they arrive. There is no they, the Admiral said. There is only a saboteur trying to cause panic. You are. Under arrest for terrorism and sedition, security teams are en route to your location. The communication cut off, leaving the research team in stunned silence. Dr. Nam spoke first. Deho, even if you are right about the threat, no one will listen. To someone with your loyalty rating, the system is designed to reject warnings from people like you. Then we are all going to die, Deho said simply. But even as the Alliance leadership dismissed his warnings, the evidence continued to mount. Engineer Borakong at the Outer Rim Defense Station sent an encrypted message to Nam's personal communicator. The message contained sensor data that made everyone's blood run cold. Massive objects were moving in the void beyond the galactic rim. Objects larger than planets but moving with purpose and intelligence. They were still far away, but they were coming. They were accelerating. How long do we have? Nam asked, after reviewing the data. Deho consulted the predecessor star charts and calculated the approaching object's speed. 6 months, he said. Maybe less. They move faster as they get closer to populated systems. Security Chief Yu stepped forward, his weapon drawn. By order of Alliance High Command, you are under arrest. Any resistance will be met with lethal force, Sangmin, Nam said urgently. Look at the data. Look at what is coming. We need him. I follow orders, you replied. My loyalty index is 94.7%. I do not question the Alliance. Double quotes. Dr. Lee moved to stand beside Nam. My loyalty index is 91.7%, she said. But I can see the evidence with my own eyes. Something is wrong with our system if it prevents us from protecting ourselves. Slowly, other members of the research team began to choose sides. Some stood with you and the Alliance, trusting in the loyalty system that had kept the galaxy peaceful for centuries. Others looked at the data and began to doubt everything they had been taught to believe. The predecessors tried to warn us, Deho said as armed security forces surrounded him. They built these complexes as beacons, hoping someone would understand the message before it was too late. But we activated their warning system 300,000 years after we needed to receive it. Enough, you shouted. You are a saboteur and a traitor. The Alliance will deal with this supposed threat through proper channels. As the security forces moved to arrest him, Deho looked up at the alien stars, visible through the complexes. Crystal ceiling, somewhere out there in the dark, the Devourers were coming home. And the galaxy's only hope was a man marked as its greatest enemy. The loyalty system that was supposed to protect. Civilization might be the very thing that would destroy it. The Alliance transport ship carrying Deho to his trial never reached its destination. Dr. Gine Nam had spent 3 sleepless nights planning the rescue. And when the moment came, everything happened perfectly. The ship's engines failed just as it passed through the asteroid field near Kepler 438, while the crew worked frantically to restore power. A small mining vessel appeared from behind one of the larger rocks. The mining ship's crew wore no loyalty brands on their foreheads. Move quickly, said the ship's captain, a weathered human woman named Minji Han. Alliance patrol ships will be here soon. Deho climbed aboard the rescue ship, still wearing prisoner restraints. Around him, he saw faces he did not recognize. Men and women from different species, all with one thing in common: Their loyalty indices were too low for normal society. "Who are you people?" he asked. "We are the defectives," Minji replied. "The ones the system could not fix. People like you, branded as dangerous because we think for ourselves." There was Deng Haiyan SEO, a former Alliance military pilot whose loyalty index had dropped to 15.2% after he questioned orders to attack civilian targets. Dr. Haijan Park, a brilliant scientist whose research into consciousness had been banned because it threatened the loyalty system. Dozens of others, all refugees from a society that demanded perfect obedience. "How many of you are there?" Daeho asked. "More than the Alliance wants to admit," Minji said. "Loyalty programming does not work on everyone. Some minds resist it naturally. Others learn to fight it over time. We have been waiting for someone like you, someone who understands both the technology and the threat." She led him to a hidden base built inside an abandoned space station. The corridors buzzed with activity as people worked on projects the Alliance would never approve. In one lab, scientists studied brain patterns, trying to understand why some minds rejected loyalty programming. In another, engineers built equipment designed to detect threats from outside normal space. "We received Engineer Kong's sensor data," Minji explained. "The objects approaching from beyond the galaxy are definitely artificial, and they are accelerating faster than our models predicted." "How long do we have?" Daeho asked. 3 months, maybe less." Daeho felt his heart sink. 3 months was not enough time to convince the Alliance leadership, even if they would listen to him. But maybe it was enough time to prepare a different kind of defense. In the weeks that followed, Daeho threw himself into studying predecessor technology. The rebels had rescued other artifacts from Alliance archaeological sites. Pieces of the puzzle that painted a terrifying picture of what was coming. The Devourers were not truly alive in any sense that current science understood. They existed partially outside normal space-time, feeding on the dimensional energy that made consciousness possible. Traditional weapons were useless against them because they could phase in and out of reality at will. But the predecessors found a way to fight them, Daeho told the assembled rebels. They built a network of reality anchors across the galaxy. Devices that could lock space-time in patterns that prevented the Devourers from phasing between dimensions.
Ow.
"What happened to?" the network asked Dr. Park. "It required a living consciousness to activate it," Daeho replied. "Someone had to sacrifice their individual existence to become a permanent guardian, maintaining the barriers through pure mental will. The predecessors tried to save their civilization, but the cost was too high." He showed them the ancient diagrams and equations. The reality anchors were still there, hidden in the deepest parts of predecessor ruins across the galaxy. But they needed someone to wake them up, someone whose mind was free from artificial constraints. "The loyalty programming interferes with the quantum consciousness required to operate the technology," Daeho explained. "That is why the current galactic civilization cannot use these defenses. Their minds are too bound by artificial patterns." Dr. So-Young Lee arrived at the rebel base 2 weeks later. She had removed her own loyalty implant. A dangerous procedure that left her weak and disoriented, but mentally free for the first time in years. "The Alliance is collapsing," she reported. "The first Devourer scouts have reached the outer rim. 3 entire star systems have gone dark. Admiral Tethras is calling it a natural phenomenon, but people are starting to panic. More refugees arrive daily, Alliance citizens whose loyalty programming was breaking down under the stress of the approaching threat." Commander Unisio Park came with a group of military officers who had chosen to think for themselves rather than follow orders that made no sense. "I watched my homeworld die," Park said, her eyes hollow with grief. "The official reports say it was a stellar collapse, but I saw the truth. Something ate our sun from the inside out." The rebels worked frantically to prepare their desperate plan. They would travel to the galactic core, where the predecessors had built the master control for their reality anchor network. If they could activate the system, so they might be able to create barriers that would keep the Devourers out of normal space, but the price would be enormous. Someone would have to merge their consciousness with the network permanently, becoming a living guardian who could never return to individual existence. "I will do it," Daeho said without hesitation. No, Minji replied firmly. We have a better idea. Instead of one person bearing the full burden, what if we shared it? What if every free mind in the galaxy contributed to maintaining the barriers? It was a radical concept, a distributed consciousness network maintained by volunteers rather than a single sacrifice. It had never been tried before, but their simulations suggested it might work. As they prepared for the journey to the Galactic core, news arrived that changed everything. The main Devourer fleet had entered the galaxy's outer spiral arm. Entire sectors were going dark as the creatures consumed not just planets and stars, but the very fabric of space-time itself. The Alliance government had finally acknowledged the threat, but their response was chaos. Military fleets attacked enemies they could not see or touch. Evacuation efforts collapsed as people fled in all directions. The loyalty system that had maintained order for centuries was breaking down. As people chose survival over obedience, "We are the galaxy's last hope," Daeho said as their small fleet prepared to depart. "Not because we are the strongest or the smartest, but because we are the only ones free enough to try something impossible." The journey to the Galactic core would take them through space that was already being consumed by the Devourers. They would face creatures that existed beyond normal reality, beings that could unmake the laws of physics with a thought. But they had something that Devourers had never encountered before. They had minds that refused to be controlled, consciousness that chose cooperation over compulsion. They were humanity's greatest flaw and its greatest strength. All wrapped up in people, the galaxy had marked as too dangerous to trust. As their ships jumped to hyperspace, Daeho wondered if being branded a saboteur might actually make him the perfect person to save everyone. The journey to the Galactic core took them through a nightmare landscape of dying stars and twisted space. The Devourers had been feeding for weeks, and reality itself was breaking down in their wake. Daeho stood on the bridge of their lead ship, watching in horror as they passed the remains of the Altrurian home system, where once there had been 7 beautiful worlds and a brilliant blue star. Now there was only empty void. Not empty space, but true nothingness. As if that entire region of the galaxy had been erased from existence. "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Hedgen Park, her voice barely a whisper. "They do not just eat matter and energy," Daeho replied. "They consume the fundamental forces that hold reality together. They leave nothing behind because there is nothing left to leave." Captain Minji Han studied the navigation displays with growing concern. "We are detecting massive gravitational distortions ahead. Something big is moving toward the core region." Through the ship's enhanced sensors, they could see them. The Devourers themselves, creatures so vast they dwarfed entire solar systems. They moved through space like living shadows, their forms shifting between dimensions in ways that hurt to look at directly. "There are hundreds of them," whispered Commander Park. "What did the predecessors ever fight something like this?" "Had the entire galaxy unified behind them," Daeho said. "We have 30 ships and a plan that might not work." But as they approached the Galactic core, something unexpected happened. Other ships began appearing on their sensors. Vessels from dozens of different systems, all converging on the same destination. People whose loyalty programming had broken down completely, leaving them free to think and act for themselves. Engineer Borakong contacted them from her hijacked defense station. "We picked up your signal," she said. "Whatever you are planning, we want to help." More ships arrived hourly. Military vessels whose crews had mutinied against orders to retreat. Civilian transports carrying families who had chosen to fight rather than flee. Even some Alliance officials who had finally seen through the lies their own system had told. "We have over 2,000 ships now," reported pilot Dong Hai in SEO. "Not much compared to the Alliance fleet, but everyone here has chosen to be here." The Galactic core was a dangerous region under normal circumstances, filled with black holes and intense radiation. Now it was even more treacherous, as space-time distortions from the Devourer attacks rippled outward from the galaxy's edge. Deep in the core region, they found what they were looking for. A massive structure built around a cluster of ancient stars, hidden for 300,000 years by predecessor technology. It was beautiful and terrifying, a crystalline construct the size of a solar system that pulsed with barely contained energy. The master control node, Deho breathed. The heart of the reality anchor network. As their ships approached the structure, something amazing happened. The ancient systems began to respond, recognizing the presence of unbound consciousness. For the first time in millennia, corridors of light opened in the crystal matrix, guiding them to docking ports that had been waiting eons for someone to arrive. Inside the structure, they found the last survivor of the predecessor civilization. It called itself the Archivist, a being that had sacrificed its physical form to become a living guardian of knowledge. It appeared as shifting patterns of light and sound, ancient beyond measure, but still burning with purpose. "You have come." At last the Archivist said, its voice echoing from crystalline walls. "We hoped that someone would eventually arise who could complete what we began. Can the network stop them?" Deho asked urgently. "Perhaps," the Archivist replied, "but the cost will be greater than you imagine. To activate the reality anchors, a living consciousness must merge with the galactic quantum field. You will become part of the network itself, experiencing every star, every planet, every living being as part of your expanded awareness. And the person who does this will cease to exist as an individual. They will become something greater. But they will lose everything that made them themselves." Deho felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Save the galaxy by sacrificing his own existence, or watch everything he cared about be consumed by creatures from beyond reality. "There might be another way," Dr. Park said suddenly. "What if we do not use just one consciousness? What if we distribute the load across multiple minds?" The Archivist considered this. It has never been attempted. Quantum resonance required. Might be too unstable with multiple participants. "But it might work," Deho said, hope rising in his chest. "Instead of one person carrying the entire burden, we share it among everyone whose mind is free enough to participate." Outside the structure, the first of our scouts were approaching the galactic core. Reality began to warp and twist as creatures that existed beyond normal physics prepared to consume the heart of the galaxy itself. "We need to try now," Commander Park said urgently, "before they reach us." Deho placed his hands on the control interface, feeling the network's vast intelligence reaching out to touch his mind. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup. Information flooded through him, the accumulated knowledge of an entire civilization that had faced this same choice eons ago around him. Other volunteers stepped forward. Dr. Lee, Captain Han, Engineer Kang, Commander Park, dozens of people, whose minds had been freed from loyalty programming, each offering their consciousness to help maintain the barriers. "Link with me," Deho said, his voice already beginning to change as the network's influence spread through his nervous system. "Share the load. We do this together, or not at all." One by one, they joined the network, each new mind added to the collective strength, distributing the impossible burden of maintaining reality barriers across multiple consciousnesses. It was agonizing and beautiful at the same time, like being torn apart and rebuilt as something greater than human. Through the network, Deho could feel the reality anchors across the galaxy responding. Ancient machines buried in predecessor ruins began to activate, creating zones of locked space-time that the Devourers could not penetrate, but the creatures were adapting, finding ways around the barriers. More minds were needed, more volunteers, willing to sacrifice individual existence for collective survival. "Broadcast the technique," Deho managed to say. Though speaking was becoming difficult as his consciousness expanded beyond his individual brain. "Teach others how to join the network. We need everyone who can break free from their programming." Connected to the predecessor network, Deho experienced consciousness on a scale no individual mind was meant to handle. He could feel every star in the galaxy, every planet, every living being as part of his expanded awareness. The sensation was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Through the network, he saw the true scope of the Devourer invasion. They were not just creatures from another galaxy. They were entities from another layer of reality entirely, beings that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They had been feeding on galaxies for billions of years, growing stronger with each civilization they consumed. But now they faced something they had never encountered before. The reality anchors were activating across the galaxy, creating zones of locked space-time where the laws of physics could not be changed. The Devourers found themselves trapped in normal space, unable to phase between dimensions as they had always done. "It is working," Dr. Hygen Park said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere as her consciousness merged with the network. "But we need more power, more minds to maintain the barriers." Deho reached out through the quantum field, broadcasting the technique to every unbound mind in the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, people whose loyalty programming had failed or been removed felt the call. They came forward voluntarily, offering their individual existence to save everything they loved. Security Chief Sang Minyu was among them. The man who had once arrested Deho as a saboteur now stood in the ruins of his destroyed homeworld. His loyalty implants sparking and failing as he watched his family's graves disappear into the void. "It was wrong," he whispered as he joined the network. "Loyalty means nothing if there is nothing left to be loyal to." Thousands joined, then millions. People from every species, every world, every walk of life. The network grew stronger with each new participant, the burden of maintaining reality barriers distributed across more and more willing minds. But the Devourers were not helpless. Trapped in normal space, they began to adapt their tactics. If they could not phase between dimensions, they would simply destroy the anchors by overwhelming them with raw force. The battle was fought not with weapons, but with will. The collective consciousness of the galaxy's free minds against creatures that existed beyond individual thought. Deho found himself at the center of it all, his original role as the man with the lowest loyalty index, making him somehow crucial to coordinating the defense. "Why me?" he asked the archivist during a brief moment of clarity. "Why does this network need someone the galaxy branded as a traitor?" "Because," the ancient being replied, "true loyalty cannot be programmed. It must be chosen freely." You're low. Loyalty index was not a sign of betrayal. It was a sign that your mind refused to accept artificial constraints. That freedom is what allows you to coordinate minds that have chosen to work together rather than being forced to obey. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The loyalty system had been backwards from the beginning. True dedication came from choice, not compulsion. A mind that chose to serve was infinitely more valuable than a mind that had no choice but to obey. Across the galaxy, the reality barriers held. The Devourers threw themselves against the locked zones of space-time, but they could not break through. For the first time in billions of years, they faced prey that could fight back effectively. But maintaining the barriers required constant effort from the network participants. They existed in a strange state between individual consciousness and collective awareness, no longer fully human, but not yet something entirely different. "We cannot keep this up forever," Commander Park observed. "The strain is enormous. Some minds are already beginning to fail." Deho felt the truth of her words. The network was powerful, but it was also fragile. If too many participants burned out, the barriers would collapse, and the Devourers would resume their feast. "Then we need to end this quickly," he decided. Through the network, he reached out to touch the quantum field that connected all reality. The predecessors had used the network defensively, creating barriers to keep the Devourers out. But what if they used it offensively instead? "What are you thinking?" Dr. Lee asked, sensing his intentions through their shared consciousness. "The Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time," Deho explained. "But right now, we have locked them into our reality. What if we push them out completely? Force them back into the void between galaxies where they belong?" It was incredibly dangerous. Manipulating reality on that scale could destroy the network participants or tear holes in space-time itself. But the alternative was watching the barriers slowly fail as more minds burned out under the strain. "Do it," said Captain Min Jihan. "We knew the risks when we volunteered." Deho gathered the network's collective will and focused it on a single purpose. Instead of just maintaining barriers, they began to actively reshape local space-time. The reality anchors became reality pushers, creating zones where the devourers simply could not exist. The effort was agonizing. Deho felt his individual consciousness stretching to the breaking point as he coordinated the attacks. Around him, other network participants screamed in pain as they pushed their minds beyond all safe limits. But it worked. One by one, the devourers were forced out of normal space, pushed back into the dimensional void where they had originated. They fought desperately to maintain their grip on reality, but the combined will of millions of free minds was stronger than their ancient hunger. The last devourer disappeared, with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief. The immediate threat was over, but the cost had been enormous. Hundreds of network participants had burned out completely, their minds unable to handle the strain of reshaping the laws of physics. "Is it finished?" Dr. Park asked weakly. "For now," Deho replied, "but they will return eventually. In another 300,000 years, when the galaxy rotates into the right position again, then we will be ready for them," the archivist said. "The network will remain active, maintained by those who choose to serve as guardians. When the time comes, future generations will know what to do." Slowly, carefully, the network participants began to return to individual consciousness. It was a strange and disorienting process, like trying to pour an ocean back into separate containers. Some, like Deho, retained part of their connection to the network, becoming permanent guardians who would help maintain the reality anchors. Others returned fully to their individual lives, but they were forever changed by the experience of shared consciousness. They carried with them the knowledge of what cooperation could accomplish when it was chosen freely rather than enforced through programming. The galaxy began to rebuild. The loyalty index system was gradually abandoned, replaced by educational programs that taught beings to think freely while choosing to work together for common goals. The old alliance government collapsed, replaced by a more flexible system that valued individual choice alongside collective responsibility. Deho established the Guardian Academy on the world where the first predecessor ruins had been discovered. Students from every species came to learn how to maintain their portion of the reality network, ensuring that future generations would be prepared when the devourers eventually returned. In the Academy's main hall, a simple plaque honored those who had sacrificed their individual existence to save the galaxy. At the top of the list was a name that had once been branded with a loyalty index of 0.1%, marked as the galaxy's most dangerous potential saboteur. Now that same name was remembered as the architect of galactic salvation, the man who had proven that true loyalty could only exist when minds were free to choose their own path. The ancient cycle was broken. When the devourers returned in 300,000 years, they would face not a galaxy of programmed minds, but a civilization of free beings who had chosen to stand together against the darkness, and that choice, Deho knew, would make all the difference.